Okay. So the question is, and we're going to go around to give a little something in response to this question. What are you becoming? When I think of this myself, you know, we can go far out existential, we can go very specific. You know, if we're going through a breakup, we might be becoming single again. It doesn't just happen at the breakup, right? It's a process. Everything's in process. I have some people coming today from out of town, and it's very funny. Whenever I have guests come, my body tightens, and my first response is, I don't want anyone to come. I don't want to have to do any work around any of this, right? And then the second someone arrives, I love every minute of hosting. So I've realized that a lot of my hosting capacities and the somatic response I have to it, it's not mine. That's something inherited. It's not true to me. So here I am in Watsonville, California, in the mountains here, and I'm becoming an easeful host. I've been thinking about this question because, we're in an election year, media is crazy. I've been thinking about how much of us is brainwashed, how much of us is in a manipulation, how much of us is functioning from things that we inherited that we don't even realize are inherited traits. Because maybe they're not inherited from our mothers and our fathers. Maybe they're inherited from centuries ago, lifetimes ago. And it's not an easy thing to ask and answer of ourselves. What parts of me feel presently truthful? And what parts of me am I functioning with that don't necessarily feel aligned with my truth? What does that even mean? What's my truth? What's real, what's not real? To put it in some basic form, what's real and what's not real? A client of mine recently said that, well, he recently was diagnosed with testicular cancer, young guy, comes from a very religious background. And he's gay. And he recently, a couple of years ago, came out and is living in that truth. And right as he's about to move in with his partner, this diagnosis comes up, and he says to me, do you think I'm being punished by God for being gay? And I said, how much of you really believes that question? He said, if you would have asked me that on Thursday of last week, it would have felt like 90% of me believed I was being punished. I said, okay, what about today? It's like 5%. I'm like, all right, do we need to go into this or can we move on? Because that's not real. That's not his truth. He knows that's his parents' truth. That's not his. But it's a fear. It comes up. It needed to be voiced. It's very difficult for us to fully step into what does it mean to have spaciousness to explore my truth, to explore what I'm becoming, to be in this process. Typically, it takes us almost cutting ourselves off from certain parts of life to find that spaciousness so that the noise doesn't creep in and manipulate the situation further. Another client of mine recently came back from a month being in Italy with her family. She's a brilliant designer. She became a mother 2 years ago. She's had a lot of difficulty balancing those two roles. How do I be a designer? How do I be a mother? It's funny because when I say that out loud, they feel one and the same. But in the social construct, right? And when we think of our sense of self, typically a lot of us go into, who am I in relationship to the social constructs? What is the world showing me I am? That comparison mind that pops up a lot. And that's very much conditioned and reinforced in our world, especially with social media, right? So this woman, she went to Italy for a month. And typically she's riddled by being not enough, being less than, having anxiety, not having the right position, not making enough money. And by the way, she's not struggling, but this is what goes on. And she said, I didn't look at Instagram once. I feel so peaceful. I spent a month with my family in places I'd never been before. I wasn't a failing designer in Italy. I was awake and alive and present and interacting with my environment and interacting with my family and feeling so much love and watching my 2-year-old daughter jump into open waters off a boat, having the time of her life. We were all so alive and playful. And I get back home and I get to New York. And all of a sudden, I feel things creeping in. And she said, I think I'm getting fired from this consulting gig that she's been working on at this fashion company, at a brand. And she said, and I know that once that news comes in, all the anxiety is going to flood into my system. And I said, well, does it have to? Can we hold on to Italy a little bit? Can we remember that your sense of self was not affected by any of that bullshit while you were there with your family, present in nature? Can we try to respond differently? Can we try to respond in a way that's actually more true with who we are at present and what we learned, and not the way our mother would have responded or our father would have responded to learning that we lost this job? Let's be curious about that. Another client this week, I'm weaving all of these things in of how we got to this question. Another client this week comes from a Hasidic Jewish community. I worked with him when he was a very young boy. He's now in his early 20s. He's come back in, which is very fun for me to see. And he said, you know, Victoria, I remember you telling me that when I was a kid, I can ground myself away from my anxiety and into a different state of calm by connecting with what's actually happening in the present moment, what colors are around me, what the ground feels like, what the weather is. And I was like, wow, you remember that? Said, yeah, I've been using it. And again, he's been traveling a lot. And he's left his community and he's recognized what it feels like when he's not at home mired in all of the shoulds of what it means to be from a religious man, right? He's like, I go to hostels in Barcelona and people aren't giving a fuck about what I do for a living or what I'm practicing or not practicing. They want to know, do you want to come with me? I'm going to go see this beautiful beach today. He's like, it's exhilarating. Presence. And a lot of you spoke about in that sense of what am I becoming? It's holding more of a capacity to be in relationship with what's present. Right? For me, that's the key. And that's what an infinity container is all about. Presence is infinite. There's infinite possibility. There's certain things that create probability, where we are, what we have access to, where we come from, what are our patterns, right? That adds to the probability of things. But it never takes away from the infinite possibility that's always in presence. And we have to learn how to work with that so that we are in awareness of our human becoming, not beingness, becomingness, the process of being alive. It's very important. It's very important. To me, it's the most important. And just like that first story where he said, "Do you think I'm being punished by God?" There was a certain tonality in his voice when he asked the question that allowed him to know there's not truth to that question. It needed to be voiced like a little boy needing to voice something to mama saying, "I agree with you. There's no truth in that question." But we could start to pick up on certain tones that go, "Oh, no, that's not my truth. That's not what I'm becoming." And while I've given some examples of people disconnecting from their normal environments to help them find spaciousness in what they're becoming, it's also so important that we recognize in the becoming, we have to be that grounded channel. We have to be in connection with, because we exist in relationship. So if we just cut ourselves off from things, we're left feeling like we're flailing in a void. And then it's very hard for us to find that playfulness in the unknown that Stephanie spoke about. The playfulness comes from connecting with, being in relationship with. And in order to do that, we have to remember that we are earthlings. And all of us have a Mother Earth and a Father Sky that always allow us to be in this infinite possibility of presence. We are held in relationship with those parents, always. So I want us to play with that today, because if we can find that, our becomingness happens with more ease. And the stories of our past and the narratives we tell our therapists, we tell ourselves, that we journal, they start to get, they lose their stickiness. They're not as important. It's like, yeah, that's an interesting story. That makes sense. And great, we can move on.